Could the child you once were still be holding the pen that's writing the story of the adult you've now become? Hello, my beautiful mythical old souls, and a huge warm welcome back. In this conversation, I'm joined by Karl Brooks. Karl is a long-term Be Mythical student and a much-loved member of our community within our Academy of the Soul, Unio. Karl's journey from crisis to reclamation has been one of the most beautiful we've had the honour to witness. Karl has a deep connection with his inner child, who, unbeknownst to him, had been running most of his life behind the scenes in his subconscious. He now wants to lead other men that are interested in connecting within themselves and breaking the patterns of childhood that are still causing havoc in their lives today. Together, we explore the hidden stories that shape our sense of self and the deep healing that becomes possible when we finally listen to the boy inside the man. We journey through Karl's childhood adventures, his breakdown and awakening, and the tender work of inner reparenting that allowed him to become a man of depth, devotion, and strength. This conversation is for all of us who sense that something essential could have got lost along the way and are ready to listen for its return. And before we jump into all of that good stuff, if you're struggling with the challenges of walking your soul path in this crazy modern world and would benefit from guidance, support, and kinship, come join our Academy of the Soul, Unio. You can find out more and join us by hopping over to bemythical.com/unio or click the link in the description. And now back to this week's episode. Let's dive in. Hello, Karl. Welcome back to the show.
Hello. Great to be back.
I am so happy to be here with you, Karl. It's already just been delightful, just reconnecting with you and kind of dipping back into your story and the way it's kind of weaved over the years we've known each other. And we were just reflecting. It's 10 years ago since we first met back in our happy school days. But I'd like to go back a bit longer ago than that to begin with, because I mean, this is really true for all of us. I notice this doing the work I do, but also interviewing the kind of people I interview. We can almost always see threads of our myth, threads of who we are here to become back in our childhood and our childhood experiences, our childhood wounds. And as you know, that's a big reason we do the work we do in the way that we do it. And so we were reflecting before we started about the way that that's absolutely true for you, but also the way that little boy Karl has been so important for you in you really following your path, doing the deep work, reconnecting to who you really are. I'd say more so in some ways for you than it is for others. And so that's where I'd like to begin. And we were just joking about the way that your people who are listening rather than watching won't be able to see, but you've got your little office set up under the stairs, Harry Potter style. So let's take a journey back to that little Harry Potter-esque boy under the stairs that was Karl. How did it all begin?
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, I used to be quite boisterous and, just used to camp out in the bushes and make these secret camps where no one knew where we was hiding, and we would watch the world go past. We used to go down to the local police station and get stickers and badges. Then we would stick the badges and stickers on and pretend we was policemen and do patrols around the local estate. If we would see something going on, we would run to the nearest phone box, because this is pre having mobile phones, and we would dial the police and tell them where the situation's happening, and then we would stand at a distance and watch it all unfold. So, yeah, it was quite interesting, and we would do police training and that, jumping over things and running and keeping fit. Um,
It's so
yeah,
interesting because I don't think that's a part of you that I've heard before. I know the kind of storyteller part of you that's been a really important part of the
mm,
reclamation, but this, how would you name it? This kind of rescuer, detective, caretaker part. How would you name that?
I think it's been quite profound because for you, the person walking down the street, we was just kids and we were just walking, but in our own heads, we were, we were superheroes. We was uh, so we was living this out in a
Mm,
mental state, um, and in that mental state, you could be anything, um,
yes.
and
Mm.
um, and yeah, so yeah, we was running down the road. We was pulling up the handbrake. We was sliding the back of the car out. We was jumping over walls. Just what happens in the movies was actually going on in our heads. But
Mm.
actually, in real life, if you was to see us, you just see some kids running down the road sideways. It's
I love that so much. Yes, of course. It was funny because I handed over to you like a beat before you said superheroes. I was like, of course, it's superheroes.
yeah,
And I love this of the way that children just have this like untamed, unfiltered a connection with that way of creating this rich inner world, which they
mm.
then, they make real, they make tangible, they make material because they act upon it. So I I feels like a really good point to take this sort of trip now into not into the future from where we are, but into the future from that little boy, because it strikes me there's quite a juxtaposition between that lively imagination fueled boy of then to the Karl that I met 10 years ago. So will you give us a snapshot of what was going on for you then?
Well, I think that story and imagination can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And
Mm,
if you're not using it to create something unique and magical, then it will take bits of what people have said that you are, and then build this story around who you are. And you can, just like you can breathe into being a policeman and really get excited and run down the road twice as fast as you would normally, um, because you're actually embodying the story of being that person. You can flip that so that it can be completely negative, and then you can take somebody else's story and what they're saying and build a story around who you are.
mm,
So if mum says that you're this and your friend says you're that, and then you start feeling like that, and then you can really get down on yourself, and then you stop trusting that inner boy, excited, passionate, all the words that you just said, and that power is then given over to others. Like, tell me who I am,
mm.
um,
Yes. And who
and that
had you been told you were back then?
just
Because,
well, the thing is that this isn't a this you go quiet, and this continues to happen internally, and then you forget that you was actually a storyteller to begin with,
mm,
um, and this narrative that you've built around who you are goes into the subconscious. You bury it down because it feels painful, so you just that can sit there for a little while, and then you
mm,
just get busy, you get distracted, you get on with life, you get on with your exams, you then get a job, you then get a girlfriend, then you've got somebody else in your life and stuff like, and life just happens, um, and and it lives like that for years and years and years until something actually shakes you up or breaks your train of thought. And when we first met, 2015, I think, that was the rupture or the breaking of my subconscious sleep as such.
Mm, yeah. I'm going to ask you another question about that in a moment, but it really stood out to me when you just said train of thought, in that we will typically use that in a more moment to moment sense. You know, we might be talking and then something happens, and usually for me it's one of the dogs wanting to go in and out of the door, and it kind of interrupts our train of thought. But I love the way you just used it, because it also then happens over years and decades, that we're in those same patterns of thought without realizing, and then sometimes that gets derailed. And
Mm.
as we were talking, actually, this is also occurring to me, before we started recording, we were reflecting on the way that as a culture we're so scared to have those ruptures. We're so scared to look at those sort of deep dark places in our psyches. We're so scared to come face to face with our wounds, and so it often takes some kind of life rupture for that to happen. But then sadly, in many cases, because we don't have the context of like how this could be the beginning of something new and true, we do our best to kind of scrabble back to what we used to know, because that feels better than where we are.
Mm.
So we'll probably get into a bit more of that in the moment, but that's really striking me at the moment, that you had this rupture. And so would you share a little bit about what that was for you? What, in fact, you know, another way of saying this is like, what brought you to me and Jonathan? What brought you to Happy School?
Yeah, and I've discussed with the wife, and she's okay with me to share this story. Um, and when I look back, I wouldn't have this story any other way. I'd just like to say that
Mm,
this story has worked out perfectly. But what we had was, me and my wife were in a codependent relationship, and it was quite, if left, it would have been quite toxic, codependency. But my wife was quite overweight at the time, and decided that she'd like to get fitter and sort of mental health out, and just she didn't want to follow in the same pattern as her family.
mm,
Um, and she made the excuse, or there was an excuse in the family, that it's just the family way. So she started to go to Slimming World and lose weight, and wear better clothes, and speak to people outside of the relationship, like friends, and go out and do stuff. And then she was this whole person, but outside of the codependent relationship. And so
mm.
that was like, so it was like Pac-Man, you know? So like she was walking away and I was like, um, but, but that for me was like, that was like this little boy that just wanted to know who he was. I knew myself in the relationship. I didn't know myself as a single entity, without that
Mm,
comfort. Um, and that's when that whole story of people telling me who I am, now who am I, without all of the comforts of being her soulmate, and being a person that she talks to, and being the person that she goes out with, and the person that says she looks nice, and now other people are doing that. It felt like betrayal.
mm.
um, but it was the part of, it was the breaking of, that I need to be whole in myself also.
Yeah. Mm. Although, of course, as with all of us, that dawning of I need to be whole myself kind of often comes later. I know that
Mm.
when you first came to us, it looked dark.
Mm.
life looked dark. Would you share a little bit about kind of what you were feeling and thinking at that point?
Um, I remember the worst time was I just thought that I was causing everyone pain and discomfort, and I actually convinced myself through story, through my inner thoughts and my inner dialogue, that these guys would be better off without me, and that I was doing them a service to not be here anymore, not be here as in on the planet. So, and and as I felt that, like everything just went calm, and I was like, there was a voice from within my head that was like, look at what's going on outside of you, and look at what's going on inside of you, and the two are not aligning. The two are in polar opposites of each other. So people are saying, I'm still here, I love you, but it doesn't feel like that because they're not doing everything that they used to do,
Mm.
and I don't feel like I used to do. So yeah, there was this difference between how I felt about myself and my situation and what was actually going on outside that I needed to explore more.
Mm.
And this voice, I was quite intrigued, like, whoa, where did that come from? That was really still, really calm, really precise, and really nurturing, and not what I'd been used to.
Mm. Yeah, it's fascinating how even in those truly dark moments, there's these kind of chinks of light where we get to see or feel or hear something that's true, but perhaps something. And I think we often can look back and think, I'm sure I had that kind of, inner guidance or inner knowing back in childhood. I often notice that it feels completely new and yet somewhat familiar at the same time.
Mm.
Um, so there's a number of things I was experiencing and thinking as you were sharing that. The first was just like, oh my gosh, the thought of the world without Karl. It's even though I know the story has a happy ending, I was just feeling this real heartbreak that that's where you were.
Mm.
Knowing you as I do, knowing the huge heart you have, knowing how beautiful your family is, so the fact that that's how you felt, yeah, really breaks my heart.
Mm.
And it breaks my heart also because I know that this is not something that you are alone in feeling and thinking. And I was thinking how there is lots of men individually that have their own version of you feeling the way you did. But I was
Mm.
also thinking this is a cultural wound and experience at the moment, playing out over a kind of larger stage
Mm.
where men's understanding of themselves, their roles, their relationships is kind of like it's changing beyond anything we've perhaps known for many many years. Like this is a profound and quite sudden
Mm.
change, and I think that that's what's going on at this kind of like larger collective level. It's like, so who am I if what I was used to be valued for, who I used to be in relationship to, and whether it's to your wife or to your
Mm.
children or to your family at large or culture at large, it's like if that's no longer what's required of me or valued from me, what's the point? Who am I? And
Mm.
I had a moment of understanding that in a way that I perhaps haven't been able to so far. So thank you, because I think this is something so important in what you've just shared there.
Mm. Yeah.
So what next? Where did that voice take you?
Um, I think a lot of it was down to nature. Nature was trying to tell me lots. I've always been. I wasn't then, but I've always been very relaxed in nature. When I go into the forest, and noise of all the wants and the needs of everyone outside calm down, I have a deep communication with the forest, with the trees, with the plants, little animals, and they metaphorically teach me stuff. I and with the inner child work, I remember going into the forest, being really still, and seeing my first robin right over there in the field and I was so excited about seeing this robin that I run for a good sort of 20 minutes, half an hour to get my binoculars from home, and then run all the way back just to
Oh.
see him up close. This here is a tree stump ring, and this here is a split that goes all the way to the middle. And if something is left, from the year of 5, this ring here is 5, and it gets wider and wider and wider and wider, and then when you get to 4950, it's a massive chasm across this tree stump ring that I'm looking at the moment, and each of the rings represents time through the years of your life. And with my inner child work that I'm doing, is if I was to go back to that little boy at 5, and ask him how he's feeling, and what is making the situation mean about him, because he always makes things not about other people but about himself personally, then I can reassure him that he's doing the best of his intent, the best that he can do at the time, and it slowly but surely closes the rupture. So something that you believed when you was 5, if you can go back to that little 5-year-old, hold him on his shoulders and say, mate, you've got this, it closes the rupture right up to the present day. And yeah, that's the work that I love doing at the moment.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, may I just using that really, really beautiful metaphor.
Mm.
As you know, so much of the work we do and have done together is the way that our deepest medicine is found in those wounds. And
Yeah.
so there absolutely is, the way you described it is that kind of rupture comes together. There absolutely is this healing that happens, and yet it isn't healed in a way where it's as if the rupture's never been the case. It's more that the kind of wounds have the opportunity to bleed gold,
Mm.
to allow what was a source of pain, a source of separation, it becomes a source of connection, a source of beauty.
Yeah.
So from that lens, now knowing what you know, how would you name what was that 5-year-old, or it could be a different age, what was that wounding, what were the experiences, the pains of that boy that you recognize now kind of led on to creating the pains you had as adult Karl?
Yeah, it is amazing. It's not the easiest journey, and the pain, the protection mechanisms that this body and this psyche have produced to keep you safe, and to
Mm,
keep that little nugget of information safe. You really have to push past the conditioning, and push past um, just the energy the energy that is taken you so far to keep that from your vision. Um,
yes.
you've got to push through that energy,
Yeah.
and it's quite sophisticated in the way that it will try and throw you off course.
Yeah. In fact, before you directly answer my question, I just want to say something about that because I think this is such a good point. It can sound as though, because we're kind of, so many years into your journey now, and
Mm,
I've had the privilege to witness so much of it, it can sound as though these things are, I guess, more available, more visible, more accessible than they actually are. But of course, this metaphor you've got of that tree slice is a great one because actually it's kind of more like we do it in layers and we do it in
mm,
cycles and spirals, and we get the
mm.
opportunity to kind of go back and see a bit, and then we think we've seen it all, and then we realize, like, oh my gosh, there's still so much and there's more. I can
Mm.
go deeper and I can go further back and I can go back to even before I even had language. And so I think that's a really good point. And as you were just saying, the reason this is so challenging and it's not so instantly available is everything is set up against it.
Mm.
And, we could talk about everything that's going on in the outer world, but really, more importantly, our whole being has been set up to allow us to survive, to function.
Yeah.
And anything that potentially is going to shift that, change that, it feels like a threat. It's
Mm.
like, how on earth can I carry on building this thing that allowed me to get so far in the world if I start to question it? It won't make sense anymore. And of course, all this is happening subconsciously, which makes it
Mm.
so tricky. And like you say, it kind of is a bit like that whack-a-mole game. It's like you kind of think you've dealt with it here, and then it pops up here and it changes
It
shape.
does.
So, yeah.
And what I was going to say is, like, um, don't think that this is. I mean, because your adult brain will want to contextualize it and use it adult to adult, but you're
Mm,
dealing with such a small little boy, and he's got little small ideas. So the word that I like to say, I mean, I say trauma. See, this trauma here. This little boy was 4 years old, and he was going to his sister's hospital when she was born, and his dad was, or his stepdad was, holding him by the hand, and he see a little Lego man by the tree stump of a tree, and tried to pick up the Lego man, and his stepfather pulled him away from it, and he couldn't communicate that he wanted the Lego man by the tree. So he
oh,
was pulled down the road, kicking and screaming, and making a big, a big situation out of what he wanted. But his dad thought that he was
mm,
being misbehaving, so he's pulling him even further. And he couldn't communicate that he wanted the Lego man.
mm,
So he believed back here, where where the crack starts, that he couldn't ask for what he needed.
yeah.
And then that just cascades into adulthood and causes loads and loads of pain. So when I was meditating, drum turning, or whatever, and that memory came up from that Lego man, I went online and I purchased a Lego man with Karl age 5 written on it,
Oh,
and I bought it for him. And when it turned up, I ceremonial unwrapped it, see what it was, put it on the side, put my hand on my chest, and said, "I've got something for you, something that was yours from day dot." Um, and then when I came in and I opened it from that place.
mm,
And now
oh,
that memory, I have a little Lego man there called Karl, age 5. I'm just holding it up to the camera.
oh,
Um,
fabulous.
but that's how you gain the trust of a little 5-year old. You give him
Yes.
what he wanted, and you say to him powerfully, um, I give this to you because you can ask for what you want of me, your parent, because I'm sort of
Mm,
reparenting myself, and I will give you what you need. Um, and then it, yeah, literally, like, there'll be a teenager that will come up next. Well, we said we wanted that car, that big car,
Could get
that that
expensive.
that Vauxhall Astra GTE, and you're like, but see, this is the key. This is the real nugget. This little boy just wanted to be heard. That teenager just wanted to be heard. So I bought him the car. It's just up on the shelf there. It's a little model GTE Vauxhall
Mm.
Astra, right? But it's not about the Vauxhall Astra. It's about him being heard, seen, and acknowledged for the feeling that he wants a car, the feeling that he wants a Lego man as such. And so I did exactly the same for the inner teenager that came up.
Oh,
Um,
gorgeous. I love the that story of the Lego man.
mm,
Of course, it was your story and your story of your 5-year-old self, and a profound aspect of your wounding. But I was also thinking there's something some real wisdom in that. I think more broadly about children and our inner children, and how they will attempt to express how they're feeling, and it won't always be in a way that we can understand, like the way you weren't able to actually communicate to your stepfather what he wanted. And we as parents, both of real children but also as parents of our inner child, can really miss what's being asked of us, can miss, it can seem as though it's a temper tantrum, it can seem as though it's whatever, not, this little person that's got wants and needs and fears and really needs to be seen and witnessed and cared for. So I think there's a important message
mm,
there more generally about how these little parts of us
mm,
try to express how they're feeling, what they need, and so easily missed, so easily
mm.
missed.
And I think the nervous system's got a lot to do with it, because when I say trauma, because I haven't experienced trauma, no, but a little situation like that
Oh, yes.
can be put into the nervous system and
Mm,
then sit there.
yes, I think it's a good thing that we have the awareness and language around these things these days, but equally it can mean that we dismiss some really important parts of our story because we can think, and I've often noticed this, it can be the people I've worked with who actually have less in the way of kind of those obvious trauma experiences that we kind of sort of say, oh, yes, that was a traumatic experience, is often the people who haven't had those, but have had either these moments like you've described, or it might be more just like the sort of water they were swimming in. And so it wasn't even kind of like big, obvious events. It can be more challenging because they're kind of like gaslighting themselves constantly. Like, well, I didn't have it that bad. I didn't have
Mm,
that, awful thing happen to me, like that person, who's in circle with me telling me about. Therefore, who am I to say that I've had trauma? And so I think
mm,
it's a really important thing to recognize that it doesn't have to be these big obvious trauma events for our little inner person to have these beliefs and this like pain and this sense I can't really fully be myself, and to really recognize like it's going to come in all different forms, and we get what we get. It's not going
mm,
to necessarily be like someone else's. And I even look back at, I've had some of those more obvious traumatic events in my life, but I don't necessarily know that they were as profoundly impactful as some of the kind of seemingly more minor moments.
mm,
And yeah, I think we're looking in the wrong places when we only focus on those, it has to be these big things to in order to call it trauma, or to even acknowledge the impact it's made. Okay,
yeah,
so
definitely.
we are we're coming up on time. What I'd love to do now is really kind of come right to, I mean, not that we haven't been talking about present day, but I really want to look at your sense as to, looking at who you are in the world now, the what you're about, what you're passionate about.
Mm.
I see the things you post, say for example in the Be Mythical Facebook group. I see the ways that you are bringing different things into, for example, your children's lives, like completely different influences
Mm.
than you perhaps would have 10 years ago. And so I'd love to know, kind of like, having experienced everything you've experienced and the ways that it's hard for boys and men today to live true to themselves. Like, what do you know now? What do you, what would you, if you, again, I suppose I could put it this way: if you were talking to, it could be a teenager listening, like the teenage Karl of years ago.
Mm.
It could be an older man. What do you feel is important for boys and men to hear today? What's the
I
message you'd
think,
love to give them?
yeah, I think that there's something I've been looking at recently, generational trauma, which is like a great grandfather will treat his son in a certain way, and then that that man will treat his son in a certain way, and it just goes down the line. And your dad um, will treat you how his dad treated him.
Mm.
And what I've done this weekend, this has been an absolute magical weekend. Um, I I met up with my dad. I haven't seen him for 20 years, and I felt nervous about the meeting. So I said, I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm feeling quite nervous. So I brought that into the conversation, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm feeling nervous as well." So what I did there is I didn't know if he was going to come with his shield up, trying to be like all protecting himself. So I put my weapons down and shown my vulnerability, saying I'm feeling a little bit not quite right. And he came down and we spoke about his dad and his childhood and issues that have affected him in his life. And I really just had a lot of compassion for like his story and his dad's story. Um, and then we went to his dad's, or we went looking for his dad's burial stone at the graveyard, and and we found it. We found it after like 3 hours of looking for it. It was in a different cemetery than my dad remembers.
Oh, that's
But
devotion
we,
for you.
yeah, we found it. But I said, for you to find this gravestone in all of these gravestones in this separate place to that, there must have been, you know, a, a spiritual help there. Dad calling you in as such. And I've done a lot of mental work, and that's great. It all stays between my ears. But I'm all about bringing things into the physical now. So I knelt down by the graveside, and I was like, you know, and I just spoke out how generational trauma has worked down the line, and it stops here today with me. And I'm not going to pass this on to my kids or the rest of the generation. And I forgive you for the way that you've treated your son, my dad. But we're here, and we're making amends. And this is where that stops. So thank you. And it was done in a loving way, but I needed to speak that out because there is a lot of generational trauma, and generational trauma to me is, yeah, dads don't know any different than how they were. And what I've been doing lately is I've been getting together with a circle of men, and they have been showing me how to be a man as such, because we haven't got elders, we haven't got people we look up to, we haven't got them role models. Even our dad, if he learnt from his dad, he isn't really the role model of secure, vulnerable, open, masculine men in a circle. But trust me, like, first of all, I was repelled by this circle, and I was like, oh, they've got too many rules, and they've got this, and I'm like, whoa, 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 what part of me is actually, you know, thinking of this? You know, where are you coming from? Well, we don't like rules, and we don't like this, you know. And I was like, yeah, but you crave structure, yeah. And this is me talking to my little boy. You crave structure, and you want reliable, and you want to learn, and you want to improve, and you want to step forward. And this group of men, instead of calling you out and saying, you've done this, they call you forward. They say, Karl, you're better than this. Who do you want to be? And then I say, I want to be a man who says something and follows through with it. And how does that impact the rest of the group? You know, and then I say, yeah, they'll have less trust in me if I say I'm going to do something and I don't do it. You know, so there's this accountability that I've never had. So I take that to my children, and we have a family gathering after dinner, and I'll say, you are so much better. And I give them their gold. I say that you're better than this. You are, you know, you need to have a tidier room so that you can live better and find things when you need to, and, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, so important that we get to kind of repattern those pathways. Um, my gosh, the story of you at your grandfather's
Mm,
grave, I had chills as you were speaking there, and I was thinking, that's so powerful, even if you were doing that alone. But the very fact you were doing that in front of your father that you hadn't seen for 20 years, my goodness. I mean, just that moment, everything that required of you and called you into, wow. I mean, if you could just take one snapshot that shows you who you are as a man, who you've become, my goodness.
mm,
How wonderful. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, it really did feel powerful. But this body needed to experience it.
yeah.
Um, so there was a very physical, emotional, spiritual move there.
Really important. I think there's so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I think there's so much to be said about that. Really, I think that's something that perhaps we are kind of like on the cusp of reclaiming again culturally. This recognition that things need to be tangible, to be able to be sort of touched and felt, and yeah, such a powerful example of that. Well, Cole, this has been such a pleasure to
Mm.
take this journey with you, to be woven into the story with you. For listeners that would like to follow you on your ongoing journey and find out kind of how that develops and perhaps things you might be offering in future, where can they find out more about you?
Well, I feel like this is a story in itself, but I feel like I've been dreaming for a long time, the world's dream, not my own. And this is about sort of reclaiming my own dream and my own desires
Mm,
and wants and needs. So I've got on Instagram and Facebook, and I've called it Waker of the Dreamers.
gorgeous.
And the of is a zero. So Waker of the Dreamers, with a zero in the of, just to be
Perfect.
different.
And we'll make sure those links from the Facebook on the show notes rather as well. Well, thank you so much, Karl. Thank you for sharing yourselves with us. And again, for me personally, it's been just such a treat to be with you all these years on your journey.
Yeah, it's been an honour. Thank you.
I very much hope you enjoyed watching that. And if you did and you're not already subscribed, then do hit that bell thingy and subscribe to automatically get each fresh new episode as it's released each week. If you'd like to find out more about the work we do at Be Mythical to guide and support old souls in this new world to live their own unique myth, do hop along to bemythical.com and you'll find out all the ways you can join us and go deeper with us on your own mythical journey. Lots of love for now. Mwah. See you again next week.